Imagine waking up tomorrow with the absolute certainty that life is not a battlefield where you must fight for every scrap of happiness, but rather an elegant game with clear rules that, once understood, can lead you to extraordinary abundance, perfect health, and profound fulfillment. What if the struggles you face, the lack you experience, and the frustrations that seem to define your existence are not punishments or random misfortunes, but simply the result of not knowing how to play the game properly? In 1925, a remarkable woman named Florence Scovel Shinn self-published a small book that would go on to influence millions of people across generations, laying the foundation for what we now call the law of attraction and manifestation teachings. Unable to find a traditional publisher willing to take a chance on her metaphysical ideas, she took matters into her own hands and brought the game of life and how to play it into the world. This act of faith and determination would prove to be more than justified, as her book became one of the most beloved and influential spiritual texts of the 20th century, continuing to transform lives nearly 100 years after its initial publication. Florence Scovel Shinn was not your typical spiritual teacher. Before she became known for her metaphysical wisdom, she was a successful artist and illustrator working in the vibrant cultural scene of early 20th century New York. Born on September 24, 1871 in Camden, New Jersey, Florence came from a distinguished family. Her great-great-grandfather, Francis Hopkinson, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and is recognized as one of the earliest documented American composers. This legacy of creativity and independence would clearly influence Florence's own path in life. Growing up in a comfortable, privileged environment, Florence showed artistic talent from an early age. She pursued her passion by attending the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia, one of the most prestigious art schools in America. It was there, among the studios filled with aspiring painters and sculptors, that she met a fellow artist named Everett Shinn. Their shared love of art drew them together, and they married in either 1898 or 1899. Historical records show both dates, though archival sources lean toward 1898, beginning a partnership that would take them to the heart of New York's artistic community. The young couple moved into a studio apartment at 112 Waverly Place in Greenwich Village, a newly constructed building that placed them right in the center of New York's bohemian culture. Everett Shinn was becoming known as one of the Ashcan School painters, a group of artists who focused on depicting the grittier, more realistic aspects of urban life. He even built a small theater next to their apartment and wrote plays in which Florence took leading roles. Their life seemed like a fairy tale of artistic success and creative fulfillment. Florence worked as an illustrator, contributing to popular magazines like Harper's and bringing to life the pages of beloved novels such as Mrs. Wiggs of the Cabbage Patch. In 1903, the Society of Illustrators elected her to an associate membership, a remarkable achievement considering that the organization wouldn't admit women to full membership until 1922. Those who knew her work described her illustrations as having a unique quality. She could draw figures that might have seemed pitiful or struggling, yet somehow she infused them with a sense of happiness and vitality that made viewers feel the worth and joy of living. Her characters were never caricatures or objects of mockery. They were appealing and provoked laughter without malice. This ability to see and convey the inherent dignity and potential in even the most challenged circumstances would later become a cornerstone of her spiritual teaching. But beneath the surface of professional success and creative achievement, Florence's personal life was experiencing profound challenges. Her marriage to Everett, which had begun with such promise, was deteriorating. The couple divorced in 1912, a scandalous event at a time when divorce carried significant social stigma, especially for women. Suddenly, Florence found herself alone, needing to rebuild not just her external circumstances but her entire understanding of life itself. Based on the trajectory of her life and the timing of her first published metaphysical work, it appears that this period of personal transformation was when Florence began exploring metaphysical and spiritual teachings. She immersed herself in the New Thought movement, which emphasized the power of the mind to shape reality and the importance of aligning with divine principles. She studied the works of pioneers like Phineas Quimby, Emma Curtis Hopkins, and the teachings of Christian Science founder Mary Baker Eddy, though Florence would develop her own unique, more accessible style. Rather than getting lost in complex theological arguments or dense philosophical language, Florence developed a practical, straightforward approach that spoke directly to people's everyday experiences and challenges. What emerged from this period of study and personal growth was not merely intellectual understanding, but lived wisdom born from the crucible of real-life difficulty. While the specific details of how Florence tested and applied these principles in her own life remain largely private, What we do know is that she emerged from this transformative period as a teacher and counselor, sharing insights with others, first in small gatherings, then in larger lectures that drew audiences hungry for practical spiritual guidance. Her teaching style was warm, friendly, and filled with examples and stories drawn from her counseling practice that made abstract spiritual concepts immediately accessible and applicable. When Florence sat down to write The Game of Life and How to Play It, she was in her early 50s. A mature woman who had experienced both the heights of creative success and the depths of personal challenge. She had learned her lessons not from books alone, but from the laboratory of her own life. This gave her teaching an authenticity and practical wisdom that resonated deeply with readers. She wasn't preaching from an ivory tower of constant success. She was sharing tools that had helped her navigate real difficulties and create genuine transformation. The book she produced was relatively short, under 100 pages in most editions, but it was densely packed with wisdom, practical techniques, and illuminating stories. Florence organized her teaching into clear chapters, each focusing on a specific spiritual law or principle. She drew heavily from the Bible, finding in Scripture the eternal truths that transcended any single religious tradition. But she also used contemporary stories, examples from her own students and clients, and even current events to illustrate how these timeless principles operated in modern life. The central metaphor of life as a game rather than a battle was revolutionary for its time and remains powerful today. Florence was suggesting that life has rules, like any game, but these are not arbitrary or unfair rules designed to trip us up. Rather, they are consistent, predictable spiritual laws that, once understood, can be used deliberately to create the outcomes we desire. Just as a skilled chess player doesn't blame the board when they lose, but instead studies the rules and strategies to improve their game, Florence taught that we must study and apply the spiritual laws governing human experience. Her timing, though she couldn't have known it, was perfect. The book was published in the mid-1920s, just before the Great Depression would shake America to its core. In the years following the economic collapse, millions of people would search for new ways of understanding and coping with hardship. Florence's message, that prosperity, health, and happiness were not dependent on external circumstances, but on internal alignment with spiritual principles, offered hope when traditional sources of security had crumbled. Her book found its audience and continued to spread through word of mouth, person to person, life to life, like a secret passed among those seeking genuine transformation. What makes Florence Scovel Shinn's work particularly remarkable is how it has endured and remained relevant across nearly a century of dramatic social, technological, and cultural change. Long before the internet, before television, before even widespread radio ownership, her ideas were spreading because they worked. People who applied her principles saw results in their lives and naturally wanted to share this knowledge with others. The book never went out of print, passing through multiple publishers and editions, translated into numerous languages, reaching readers on every continent. In more recent decades, Florence's influence has been explicitly acknowledged by many of the most popular teachers in the personal development and spiritual growth movements. Louise Hay, who built a publishing empire on principles of affirmation and self-love, openly credits Florence Scovel Shinn as a major influence on her work. Wayne Dyer, Marianne Williamson, and countless others have drawn from the well of wisdom that Florence first tapped and made accessible to everyday people. The entire modern manifestation movement, popularized by books like The Secret, is built on foundations that Florence helped establish. But who was Florence Scovel Shinn beyond her published works? Those who knew her described a woman of warmth and humor, someone who took spiritual principles seriously but didn't take herself too seriously. She had a keen sense of humor that showed up in her illustrations and carried over into her teaching. She could laugh at human foibles, including her own, while maintaining a profound respect for the divine potential within each person. This combination of lightness and depth, humor and seriousness, made her teaching accessible without being shallow, profound without being ponderous. Florence continued teaching and writing throughout the 1920s and 30s. Her second book, Your Word is Your Wand, was published in 1928 and consisted primarily of specific affirmations for different life situations. Then came The Secret Door to Success in 1940, which expanded on many of the themes from her first book. After her death in 1940 at the age of 69, 2 more works were published, The Power of the Spoken Word in 1945 and The Magic Path of Intuition in 2013, the latter discovered as a typewritten manuscript and published by Louise Hay's company. Florence died on October 17, 1940, at her home on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Her obituary in the New York Times noted she had suffered an illness of several weeks, though the exact nature of this illness was not specified and remains a matter of some uncertainty in historical records. What is clear is that she left behind a body of work that would continue to touch millions of lives long after her physical presence was gone. Her obituary in the New York Times, brief as it was, identified her as someone who specialized in metaphysics, but was also known as an illustrator, an interesting inversion of how she had spent the majority of her professional life, but perhaps an accurate assessment of where her most lasting contribution would be made. Today, when we pick up the game of life and how to play it, we are connecting with a teaching that has proven its worth through nearly a century of real-world application. We are learning from a woman who wasn't born into spiritual teaching, but discovered it through her own need and struggle, tested it in the laboratory of her own life, and then shared it with a generosity and clarity that continues to illuminate the path for seekers today. The game of life, as Florence understood it, is not about competition with others or proving your worth through achievement. It's not about accumulating the most toys or conquering the most territory. Instead, it's about understanding the rules that govern how thought becomes reality, how consciousness creates experience, and how aligning with spiritual principles leads inevitably to what Florence called the square of life: perfect health, perfect wealth, perfect love, and perfect self-expression. These are not luxuries reserved for a special few. They are, in Florence's teaching, your birthright, your natural state, the divine design that exists for you in what she called the superconscious mind. As we prepare to explore the depths of Florence's teaching, to understand the spiritual laws she articulated and the practical techniques she offered for applying them, we step into a lineage of wisdom that stretches back through the centuries, but speaks directly to our contemporary moment. The challenges we face may look different from those of 1925. We worry about technology overload rather than whether we can afford a telephone, about career pivots in a gig economy rather than losing a factory job, but the fundamental human questions remain the same. How do we create prosperity? How do we experience love? How do we find our purpose? How do we transform fear into faith, lack into abundance, confusion into clarity? Florence Scovel Shinn believed she had found answers to these questions, not through wishful thinking or positive denial of difficulty, but through understanding and applying spiritual laws as reliable and consistent as the law of gravity. Let's step into her world of wisdom and discover how this artist-turned-teacher can guide us in playing the greatest game of all, the game of life itself. The 3 levels of mind. Understanding your mental architecture. At the heart of Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching lies a profound understanding of how the human mind actually works. Before we can play the game of life effectively, we need to understand the players on our internal team. Florence identified 3 distinct levels or departments of mind, each with its own function and characteristics. Understanding these 3 levels is absolutely crucial, because most people live their entire lives unaware that they possess this complex mental machinery, operating on autopilot and wondering why they can't seem to create the results they desire. Throughout her books, Florence illustrates these principles with stories and examples drawn from her counseling practice and the experiences of her students. While we don't always have independent verification of each specific case she describes, these teaching stories serve to illuminate the spiritual laws she's articulating, and many readers over the decades have reported similar results when applying these principles in their own lives. The first level Florence describes is the subconscious mind, and she offers a brilliant metaphor to help us understand it. The subconscious is like steam or electricity. It is pure power without direction. Think about that for a moment. Steam can drive a locomotive across a continent, or it can dissipate uselessly into the air. Electricity can light up an entire city or deliver a deadly shock. The power itself is neutral. Everything depends on how it's directed and channeled. The subconscious mind is the same way. It is tremendous creative power, but it has no power of induction, no ability to judge or discriminate. It simply takes what is impressed upon it and works to make it manifest in your external reality. This is a revolutionary insight that Florence shared with other New Thought teachers of her era, though she expressed it with particular clarity and practical application. Your subconscious mind doesn't care whether what you're impressing upon it is something you actually want or something you fear. It doesn't distinguish between a goal and a worry. It simply takes the images and feelings that are most strongly and consistently present in your consciousness and begins working to manifest them in your life experience. This is why Florence emphasized that whatever you feel deeply or imagine clearly is impressed upon the subconscious and carried out in the most minute detail. To illustrate this principle, Florence recounts in her book the story of a woman who, as a child, loved to play make-believe. This girl would dress up in black clothes and wear a long black veil, pretending she was a widow. Adults thought she was clever and amusing, and she enjoyed the attention and the drama of the role. She would spend hours in this costume, deeply immersed in the feeling of being a widow. Fast forward to her adult life, she fell deeply in love and married a wonderful man, But within a short time he died, and she found herself wearing black and a sweeping veil for many years, a real widow living the role she had so vividly imagined as a child. Now, as Florence presents it, this is not a story about punishment or some cruel cosmic joke. Florence uses this example to illustrate the mechanical, impersonal operation of a spiritual law. The young girl had impressed upon her subconscious mind a powerful image of herself as a widow, complete with the emotions and sensations associated with that role. The subconscious, faithful servant that it is, worked to create the conditions that would match that internal picture, regardless of the havoc it created in the woman's life. The subconscious has no judgment about whether something is good or bad for you. It simply manifests what is most strongly imprinted upon it. This understanding leads to a crucial realization. You must become consciously aware of what you are impressing upon your subconscious mind. Most people have no idea that they are constantly programming their own creative machinery with their habitual thoughts, their predominant emotions, their repeated words, and the mental images they dwell upon. They think these things are just random mental noise, but Florence reveals that they are actually commands being given to the most powerful creative force at your disposal. The second level of mind that Florence describes is the conscious mind, which she sometimes calls the mortal mind or carnal mind. This is your everyday, reasoning, intellectual mind, the mind you're using right now to follow these ideas and understand these concepts. The conscious mind is the part of you that observes life as it appears to be through your physical senses. It sees death, disaster, sickness, poverty, and limitation of every kind. It lives in the world of appearances and judges everything based on surface conditions. Here's where things get tricky. The conscious mind, when left to its own devices, tends to focus on problems and limitations. It notices what's wrong much more readily than what's right. It worries about the future and regrets the past. It compares your life to others and usually finds you lacking. And because the conscious mind is constantly feeding information to the subconscious, this negative, limited perspective gets impressed upon your creative power and begins to manifest as your life experience. Think about how this plays out in everyday life. You see a bill you can't pay, and your conscious mind says, "I don't have enough money." That thought, coupled with the feeling of anxiety or fear, impresses upon your subconscious a picture of lack and insufficiency. Your subconscious, being a faithful servant, begins working to create more situations that match this picture. You might miss opportunities, make poor financial decisions, or attract unexpected expenses, not because you're being punished, but because your subconscious is manifesting the pattern you've given it. Or consider health. You notice a symptom, some pain or discomfort, and your conscious mind immediately leaps to worry. What if this is something serious? What if it gets worse? That worry, held consistently and felt deeply, impresses a picture of disease and deterioration upon the subconscious. Florence would say that many illnesses are actually manifestations of wrong thinking held in the subconscious mind. This doesn't mean that all illness is your fault, or that you can simply think away a broken leg, but it does suggest that your habitual mental and emotional patterns play a much larger role in your health than most people realize. The conscious mind, Florence taught, is meant to be a filter and a director, not the primary creative force. Its job is to choose what gets impressed upon the subconscious, to stand guard at the door of your deeper mind, and allow only those thoughts and images that align with what you truly want to create. But most people allow their conscious mind to be dominated by fear, doubt, worry, and negative expectations based on appearances, and then they wonder why their lives don't improve. This is where the third level of mind comes in, and this is truly where Florence's teaching becomes transformative. She calls it the superconscious mind, or the God mind within each person. This is the realm of perfect ideas, the level of consciousness that is eternally connected to divine intelligence. In the superconscious mind exists what Florence calls the divine design for your life, a perfect pattern, a blueprint for your highest and best expression as a unique individual. Florence borrowed from Plato the concept of perfect forms or patterns that exist in a higher realm, and she connected this to the biblical idea that you are made in the image and likeness of God. In the superconscious mind, there is a perfect picture of who you are meant to be and what you are meant to do. There is a place that you are meant to fill and no one else can fill. Something you are meant to do that no one else can do. This divine design usually flashes across your conscious awareness as what seems like an unattainable ideal, something too good to be true, a dream that seems beyond your reach. But Florence insists that this flash of inspiration, this vision of something greater, is not a cruel tease or an impossible fantasy. It is actually your true destiny, your real purpose, being communicated to you from the infinite intelligence that resides within your own being. The problem is that most people, when they get a glimpse of this divine design, immediately allow their conscious mind to shut it down with doubts and fears. That's not realistic. Who am I to aspire to that? I don't have the resources or the training or the connections to make that happen. And so the vision fades, and the person settles for something less, something that seems more reasonable given current circumstances. They end up, as Florence puts it, in ignorance of their true destinies, striving for things and situations which do not belong to them and would only bring failure and dissatisfaction if attained. They work hard, they struggle, they may even achieve some success by worldly standards, but there's always a nagging sense that something is missing, that they're not living the life they were meant to live. The key to playing the game of life successfully is to bridge these three levels of mind in the right way. The superconscious holds the perfect pattern. The conscious mind must choose to focus on that pattern, rather than on limiting appearances, and the subconscious must be impressed with this higher vision so that it can work to manifest it in your physical reality. Florence describes this process as being like a singer making a record on a phonograph. Every note and tone of the singer's voice is captured by the sensitive recording disc. If the singer coughs or hesitates, that too is recorded. Your subconscious mind is like that recording disc, constantly registering every thought, every emotion, every word you speak. It's creating a record of your life based on what you consistently give it to work with. This is why Florence emphasizes the importance of what she calls making new records. She encourages people to speak this powerful declaration: I now smash and demolish every untrue record in my subconscious mind. They shall return to the dust heap of their native nothingness, for they came from my own vain imaginings. I now make my perfect records through the Christ within, the records of health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. This is not just pretty poetry or wishful thinking. It is a technique for impressing the subconscious mind with a new pattern, for overwriting the old, limiting records with new, empowering ones. And the source of these new records is not more limiting ideas from the conscious mind, but perfect ideas from the superconscious mind, from that level of consciousness that is connected to divine intelligence and knows your true purpose and potential. One of the most practical aspects of Florence's teaching on the three levels of mind is her emphasis on the role of expectancy. The subconscious, she teaches, is impressed not just by what you think or say, but by what you genuinely expect. This is why affirmations don't work for many people. They're saying positive words with their lips while expecting negative results in their hearts. The subconscious responds to the expectation, not the words alone. Florence taught the law of expectancy. Whatever you vividly imagine and expect with faith tends to manifest. If you expect problems, you create a mental atmosphere that attracts problems. If you expect good, you create an atmosphere that attracts good. This isn't about forcing yourself to have positive thoughts while denying reality. It's about consciously connecting with the superconscious mind, receiving its perfect vision for your life, and then expecting that vision to manifest because it comes from divine intelligence rather than human limitation. Let me share another of Florence's stories that illustrates this beautifully. A woman came to her in great distress over financial difficulties. She expected poverty, expected to lose her home, expected hardship. Florence worked with her to change that expectancy by connecting her with the superconscious vision of abundance that was her divine right. The woman began affirming and visualizing divine supply flowing into her life. She took what Florence called active steps of faith, small actions that demonstrated her expectancy of good. And according to Florence, within a short time the woman experienced what seemed like a miracle. Unexpected money came to her from a source she had never imagined, solving her financial crisis completely. Critics might say this is coincidence or wishful thinking, but Florence would point to case after case, story after story, principle after principle, consistently demonstrating that when you align your three levels of mind properly, when you receive the perfect pattern from the superconscious, focus your conscious attention on that pattern and impress it upon your subconscious with genuine expectancy, circumstances begin to shift and change in ways that often seem miraculous, but are actually the natural operation of spiritual law. The practical application of understanding these three levels of mind is profound. It means that you must become vigilant about what you allow into your conscious awareness, because that awareness feeds your subconscious programming. It means you must develop the discipline to focus on the vision from your superconscious rather than the problems presented by your conscious perception of circumstances. It means you must cultivate genuine expectancy of good by repeatedly impressing your subconscious with images and feelings of your desired reality already fulfilled. Florence wasn't teaching people to deny problems or pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. She was teaching them to understand the creative machinery of their own minds, so they could use it deliberately rather than accidentally. She was revealing that what most people call reality is actually just a manifestation of their past and current mental programming, and that by changing that programming, they can change their reality. This understanding of the three levels of mind is the foundation upon which all of Florence's other teaching rests. Before you can understand the law of prosperity, the power of the spoken word, the principle of non-resistance, or any of the other spiritual laws she teaches, you must first grasp that you are a creative being with tremendous power residing in your own consciousness. You must understand that your circumstances are not happening to you, they are happening through you, as manifestations of your predominant mental and emotional patterns. And perhaps most importantly, you must realize that you have access right now, in this very moment, to a higher intelligence within you, the superconscious mind, the Christ within, the God mind, that knows your perfect path and can guide you to your highest expression of life. This isn't some distant deity you must plead with or hope will smile upon you. This is your own deepest nature, your truest self, waiting patiently for you to stop listening exclusively to the fears and limitations of your conscious mind and start receiving the perfect vision that has always been there, ready to manifest through you. The law of prosperity, your divine right to abundance. Having established the foundation of how the mind works, Florence Scovel Shinn turns her attention to one of the most pressing concerns in most people's lives: prosperity and material abundance. This chapter of her teaching is particularly powerful because she doesn't approach prosperity as something spiritual people should feel guilty about desiring, nor does she reduce it to mere materialism. Instead, she frames prosperity as a spiritual principle and presents abundance as your divine birthright. Florence begins with a radical statement that would have shocked many people in her more conservative era and still challenges people today. It is your divine right to have plenty, more than enough. Your barns should be full, and your cup should overflow. This, Florence insists, is God's idea for humanity. The divine design includes abundance, not barely scraping by. The universe is not stingy, creation is not miserly, and God does not want you to struggle in lack and limitation. This perspective flies in the face of many religious and cultural teachings that glorify poverty and suggest that spiritual people should somehow be above caring about material things. Florence would say that this thinking is precisely what creates the barriers of lack in human consciousness. When you believe that wanting prosperity is somehow unspiritual or that struggling with lack is noble or purifying, you create a conflict in your own mind that blocks the natural flow of abundance that should be yours. But Florence is also careful to distinguish true prosperity consciousness from greed or obsessive focus on accumulation. She's not teaching people to worship money or to make material gain their primary purpose in life. Instead, she's teaching that prosperity is one aspect of the complete life, one corner of what she calls the square of life, which includes health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. Material abundance allows you to fulfill your purpose without the constant distraction and energy drain of financial worry. It provides the resources to serve others, to create beauty, to contribute to the world in meaningful ways. The key to understanding Florence's teaching on prosperity is recognizing that she sees money and material resources as forms of energy, as symbols of divine supply that is infinite and inexhaustible. The problem is not that there isn't enough to go around. The universe is abundant beyond measure. The problem is that people create barriers in their own consciousness that block the flow of this abundance into their lives. What are these barriers? Florence identifies several major ones, starting with the belief in lack itself. When you see life through the lens of scarcity, when you constantly worry about not having enough, when you count your pennies anxiously and hoard what you have in fear, you are actually creating the very lack you fear. You are impressing upon your subconscious mind a picture of insufficiency, and your faithful subconscious goes to work manifesting more situations that match that picture. Florence shares numerous teaching examples in her writings to illustrate these principles. In one, she describes a woman who owned a valuable pearl necklace but constantly said, "Someday I may have to sell these pearls to survive." She was seeing the pearls not as a treasure to enjoy, but as emergency insurance against poverty, which meant her focus was always on the potential for poverty rather than on present abundance. As Florence tells it, over time the woman's financial situation deteriorated until she was indeed forced to sell the pearls. Her words and thoughts, Florence argues, had created the very reality she feared. This is an example of what Florence calls the law of attraction in action, though she doesn't use that exact phrase. You attract into your life whatever you focus upon consistently and feel deeply. If your focus is on lack, if your predominant feeling is anxiety about not having enough, you create a magnetic pull that draws lack into your experience. Conversely, if your focus is on abundance, if your predominant feeling is gratitude for what you have and expectancy of more good coming, you create a different kind of magnetic pull that attracts prosperity. But Florence goes deeper than just positive thinking. She teaches that true prosperity consciousness begins with recognizing that the universe itself is your supply, not your job, not your investments, not any specific channel. When you tie your sense of security to a particular source, this employer, this contract, this investment, you create anxiety because you know that source could disappear. You're building your prosperity on sand rather than rock, but when you recognize that infinite supply flows from the universe itself, from divine consciousness, and that this supply is inexhaustible and eternal, you can relax into a deep sense of security that transcends circumstances. This doesn't mean you don't work or make practical efforts. Florence isn't teaching passivity, but your work becomes a channel through which supply flows to you, not the source of the supply itself. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. When you know that the universe is your source and your job is simply a current channel, you can lose that job without losing your prosperity consciousness. You know that the universe will open another channel, perhaps an even better one, because the source remains constant even when specific channels change. Florence introduces the concept of active faith as essential to prosperity. Active faith means taking concrete steps that demonstrate your expectancy of good. In one of her teaching examples, she describes a woman who wanted to experience prosperity but was stuck in a consciousness of lack. Following Florence's guidance in the story, the woman took the symbolic action of buying expensive magazines, not to show off, but to immerse herself in the feeling of abundance, to surround herself with beautiful things, and feel what it would be like to have plenty. This seemingly small action was actually a powerful technique for impressing the subconscious mind with a new picture. The woman was taking an active step that said, "I am a person who has abundance to spend on beautiful magazines." Another example Florence gives is even more specific. In her book, she describes a woman who affirmed that she needed a particular sum of money. Instead of just saying the affirmation and waiting anxiously, the woman in the story took active steps. She bought an elegant purse and said, "This is my magical purse for receiving the riches the universe is sending me." She prepared a place in her home for the money as if it had already arrived. These weren't foolish expenditures or denial of her actual situation, as Florence presents them. They were conscious techniques for impressing the subconscious with expectancy and preparation, for creating an internal atmosphere that matched the prosperity she was affirming. Florence also emphasizes the spiritual law of circulation. She teaches that abundance is not meant to be hoarded but to flow through you. When you receive, you must also give. When you hold money in a tight grip of fear, afraid to spend it or share it because you might need it someday, you dam up the flow. You stop the circulation of good through your life. But when you give freely and generously, trusting that more will come, you keep the stream of prosperity flowing powerfully through your experience. This principle of circulation often challenges people who are struggling financially. It seems counterintuitive to give when you barely have enough. But Florence would say that giving from a spirit of gratitude and faith, even when your resources seem limited, is one of the most powerful techniques for changing your prosperity consciousness. You're declaring through your action, "I am not in lack. I am part of the abundant flow of the universe, and there is always enough to share." She tells the story of a woman who felt an inner urge to give money to a friend who had previously helped her. The logical conscious mind might have argued against this. You need that money yourself. Don't be foolish. But the woman trusted her intuition, which Florence would identify as guidance from the superconscious mind, and she gave the money. Shortly afterward, thousands of dollars came to her from an unexpected source. By expressing faith in infinite supply through her generous action, she opened channels for even greater abundance to flow to her. Florence is also very clear that true prosperity includes peace of mind. Money that comes with anxiety, stress, or violation of your values is not true prosperity. She teaches that you should always affirm for abundance that comes under grace in a perfect way and is mine by divine right. These qualifying phrases ensure that you're not inadvertently attracting money through harmful means or at the expense of other important areas of your life. The phrase "mine by divine right" is particularly important. Florence taught that when you demand only what is yours by divine right, you avoid the problem of trying to manipulate specific outcomes or force particular situations. You're not saying, "I want this specific house," or "I want that specific amount of money from this specific source." You're saying, "I claim the prosperity that is meant for me, according to the divine design of my life." This open-ended approach allows the universe to deliver your good in ways that may be far better than what your limited conscious mind could imagine. Another key element of Florence's prosperity teaching is the power of gratitude. She emphasizes that you must give thanks for your blessings even before they appear in physical form. This is not about pretending you have something you don't have. It's about recognizing that everything you need already exists in the invisible realm of the superconscious mind, in the storehouse of infinite supply, and is making its way to you. Gratitude expressed in advance is a powerful tool for impressing the subconscious with expectancy and aligning your vibration with receiving. Florence would have people affirm statements like, "I am grateful because the universe is my inexhaustible source, and I am now connected to a constant stream of prosperity under perfect and divine conditions." Notice how this affirmation combines several elements: gratitude, recognition of the true source, present tense awareness of connection to that source, and the qualifying phrase about perfect conditions. She also taught that people must change their internal conversation about money. Stop saying things like, "I'm completely broke," or "I can't afford that," or "money is tight." Every time you speak these words, you're impressing your subconscious with a picture of lack. Instead, even when your bank account is low, affirm, "The universe is my supply. Infinite resources are available to me. Money comes to me easily and frequently from expected and unexpected sources." This might feel like lying when you look at your actual financial situation, but Florence would say you're not lying, you're declaring a higher truth. You're speaking from the perspective of the superconscious mind, which sees your divine design of abundance, rather than from the limited perspective of the conscious mind, which sees only current appearances. And remember, the subconscious mind doesn't judge these statements as true or false, it simply takes them as instructions for what to create. Florence also addresses the fear many people have about losing what they already possess. She teaches that whatever you cling to with fear, you will lose. Fear creates a vibration that actually pushes away what you're desperately trying to hold on to. The woman with the pearl necklace lost it precisely because she held it in consciousness with fear of loss rather than gratitude for possession. If she had worn and enjoyed the pearls with thankfulness and without anxiety about the future, she would have kept them, according to Florence's understanding of spiritual law. This principle extends beyond material possessions. People who clutch at relationships in fear of being alone often drive away the very people they're trying to hold. People who hoard opportunities or information at work, afraid that sharing will diminish their own position, often find themselves stuck or even unemployed. The universe responds to the energy of fear by creating the feared circumstance, whereas it responds to the energy of faith and trust by creating more of what is trusted in. One of Florence's most powerful teachings on prosperity is about what she calls the law of use. This law states that what you have must be used to be retained. If you have money and you're hoarding it, too afraid to use it or circulate it, you violate the law of use, and you'll find that money draining away through unexpected expenses or poor decisions. But if you use what you have wisely and with faith, knowing that more will come, you're working with the law of use and abundance flows freely. This doesn't mean reckless spending. Wisdom is always part of divine order. But it does mean that if you have a talent and you're not using it, afraid to put yourself out there, that talent will atrophy. If you have knowledge and you're hoarding it rather than sharing it, opportunities to use that knowledge will dry up. The universe gives us resources to use, not to bury in the ground like the servant in the biblical parable who was so afraid of losing his master's money that he hid it away and never used it productively. Florence taught that one powerful affirmation for prosperity is, "I am in harmony with the wealth of the universe. I lack nothing, for divine supply precedes me." This statement aligns you with the flow of abundance and affirms that your supply is always ahead of you, already in place before you arrive at your point of need. It's a statement of trust in divine timing and divine provision. She also encouraged people to think of themselves as heirs of the richest man in the universe, meaning that as expressions of divine consciousness, we have inheritance rights to all the abundance of creation. This isn't arrogance, it's recognizing your true nature and your rightful place in the cosmic order. When a prince remembers that he's a prince, he doesn't have to beg or struggle for his needs to be met. Florence was teaching people to remember their spiritual royalty, their divine heritage of abundance. For those struggling with persistent financial difficulties, Florence would say to examine your deep beliefs about money and worthiness. Many people unconsciously believe they don't deserve prosperity, often due to childhood conditioning or religious teaching that glorified poverty. Others believe that money is somehow evil or corrupting, so they unconsciously push it away even while consciously trying to attract it. These subconscious beliefs create powerful barriers that must be identified and cleared before prosperity can flow freely. The process of clearing these barriers involves what Florence calls denials, statements that reject and neutralize false beliefs. For example, if you discover a deep belief that you don't deserve wealth, you would deny that belief. There is no truth in the belief that I am unworthy of abundance. I am a divine child of the universe, and prosperity is my birthright. Then you follow with an affirmation that establishes the truth. I now claim my divine heritage of unlimited abundance. Rich blessings flow to me from all directions. Florence's teaching on prosperity ultimately comes down to this. You must change your consciousness before you can change your circumstances. You cannot prosper consistently while holding a consciousness of lack. You cannot attract wealth while believing you're unworthy of it. You cannot experience financial freedom while clutching in fear at everything you have. The external world of money and material resources is simply a mirror reflecting back your internal world of beliefs, expectations, and predominant feelings. This is actually empowering news, even though it might not feel that way at first. It means that your prosperity doesn't depend on the economy, or your age, or your education, or your connections, or any external factor. It depends on your consciousness. And your consciousness is something you can change. You can't always control what happens in the world around you, but you can always control what you focus on, what you believe, what you expect, and what you speak. And by controlling these things, you direct your subconscious mind to create different circumstances. Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching on prosperity is not a get-rich-quick scheme or a magical formula for instant wealth. It's a profound understanding of spiritual law applied to material manifestation. It requires consistency, faith, patience, and the willingness to align your entire consciousness, your thoughts, your feelings, your words, your beliefs, your expectations, and your actions with the truth of divine abundance rather than the appearance of lack. When you do this work faithfully, prosperity is not just possible, it is, according to Florence, inevitable. The power of the spoken word, using your creative authority. If understanding the 3 levels of mind provides the foundation for Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching, and recognizing your divine right to prosperity addresses one major area of human concern, then the principle of the spoken word might be her most distinctive and practical contribution to metaphysical teaching. Florence had an almost unshakable conviction in the creative power of human speech, seeing words not merely as communication tools, but as actual forces that shape reality. The title of one of her books, Your Word is Your Wand, captures this idea perfectly. A wand, in fairy tales and magical stories, is an instrument of transformation. The magician waves the wand and speaks an incantation, and reality changes according to the words spoken. Florence taught that your words function in exactly this way. They are wands of creation that literally shape your experience of life. This isn't poetry or metaphor, it's spiritual law, as real and consistent as the law of gravity. Florence draws heavily from the Bible to support this teaching, particularly from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. She interprets this to mean that the creative principle of the universe itself is expressed through words, through spoken declaration. God speaks, and reality manifests. Let there be light, and light appears. As beings made in the divine image, we share in this creative power of speech. Our words, while obviously not as powerful as divine words, still carry real creative force that affects our circumstances and experiences. The mechanism by which words work their creative magic is through the subconscious mind. Remember that the subconscious is like a recording device, capturing everything you say and taking it as instruction for what to create in your life. Florence emphasized that whatever man voices, he begins to attract. If you're constantly saying "I'm so tired," you're giving your subconscious an instruction to create more experiences of tiredness. If you frequently say "I'm broke," you're instructing your subconscious to maintain and create more conditions of being broke. If you declare "I'm lonely," you're setting in motion forces that will ensure you experience loneliness. Now you might object, but I say those things because they're true. I really am tired, broke, and lonely. Florence would respond that by speaking these conditions, you're not just describing reality, you're creating and perpetuating it. You're taking a temporary situation and turning it into an ongoing pattern by impressing it upon your subconscious through repeated declaration. Even if something is currently true on the physical level, by speaking it you make it more true, more entrenched, more difficult to change. This is why Florence taught that you must be extremely careful with your words. She quotes an old saying, "Man should only dare to use his words for 3 purposes: to heal, to bless, or to prosper." This is a high standard, perhaps impossible to meet perfectly, but it establishes the principle that your words should be chosen deliberately, with awareness of their creative power, rather than spoken carelessly based on current emotions or circumstances. One of the most powerful concepts Florence taught regarding words is what she called the law of non-resistance, as applied to speech. She said that if you speak words that resist or fight against negative conditions, you actually strengthen those conditions. For example, if someone has done you wrong, and you spend hours talking about what a terrible person they are, how they've hurt you, how angry you are, you're not just venting, you're actually impressing those negative images and feelings more deeply into your subconscious, ensuring that you'll continue to experience the painful emotions and possibly attract more similar situations. Instead, Florence taught, you should bless that which you would change. If someone has wronged you, rather than cursing them or complaining about them, speak words of forgiveness and blessing. I bless this person and set them free. I am free from all resentment and anger. Only good comes from this situation. This feels counterintuitive and even wrong to the conscious mind that wants justice or revenge. But Florence insisted that this practice neutralizes the negative situation at the level of consciousness and allows healing and resolution to occur. She illustrated this with numerous stories from her practice. One woman came to her full of bitterness toward an ex-husband who had treated her badly. Florence instructed her to stop all negative talk about him, and instead to affirm, "I bless my former husband and release him completely. I am now free to attract a relationship of love and harmony." The woman found this almost impossible at first. Her conscious mind rebelled against blessing someone who had caused her pain. But she practiced the affirmation faithfully, and according to Florence, within a short time, not only did her emotional state improve dramatically, but new opportunities for love and happiness began appearing in her life. Florence taught that the universe responds to the dominant vibration of your words. Words spoken in anger, fear, resentment, or bitterness carry a low, heavy vibration that attracts more experiences that match that vibration. Words spoken in love, faith, gratitude, and confidence carry a high, light vibration that attracts harmonious and positive experiences. You literally set the frequency of your life through the words you most commonly speak. This is why affirmations, properly done, are so powerful. An affirmation is a positive declaration spoken in the present tense, as if the desired condition already exists. Florence gave specific guidelines for creating effective affirmations. First, they must be stated positively rather than negatively. Don't say "I am not sick," but rather "I am radiantly healthy." The subconscious doesn't process negatives well. It focuses on the image, which in the first case is sick. Second, affirmations must be stated in the present tense, not the future. Don't say "I will be prosperous," but "I am prosperous now." If you keep affirming something in the future tense, your subconscious keeps it perpetually in the future, always just out of reach. By stating it in the present, you claim it now and give your subconscious a current instruction to manifest. Third, effective affirmations should evoke a feeling and create a vivid mental picture. Florence gave the example of a woman who wanted more money. The affirmation "I am wealthy" didn't resonate with this particular woman. But when Florence helped her create the affirmation "My purse is heavy, crammed, and jammed with money," the woman immediately felt a shift. She could picture and feel her purse heavy with abundance. This affirmation clicked for her in a way the more general one hadn't. Fourth, Florence taught that affirmations should include phrases like "under grace in a perfect way" and "mine by divine right." These qualifiers are important. They ensure that you're not trying to manipulate specific outcomes or forcing things to happen through sheer willpower, which often backfires. Instead, you're aligning with divine order and allowing your good to come in the way and timing that serves your highest interest. Florence would have people create affirmations for every area of life. For health, "Every cell in my body is filled with divine light and vibrates with perfect health and energy." For relationships, "I attract loving, harmonious, and supportive relationships. My perfect companions seek me out and find me." For career, "I am divinely guided to my perfect self-expression. I perform work that I love and am compensated abundantly." For protection, "I am surrounded by divine light and love. No harm can come near me, for I am under divine protection." But Florence also warned against what she called forcing a picture through willpower or anxiety. The process should feel natural and faith-filled, not strained. You state the affirmation with conviction, but then release it, trusting the superconscious mind and divine intelligence to work out the details. If you're anxiously repeating an affirmation while desperately hoping it will work, the underlying energy is fear and doubt, which undermines the positive words. She also taught about the power of spontaneous, spirit-led declarations. Sometimes, in a moment of inspiration, you might speak words that you haven't planned or prepared. Florence believed these spontaneous utterances could be particularly powerful because they come from the superconscious mind rather than the calculating conscious mind. She told of instances where she or her students would suddenly speak words of truth or blessing in a specific situation, and dramatic changes would immediately follow. One powerful technique Florence taught was to use definite, specific declarations to neutralize fearful thoughts. If you find yourself worrying about money, immediately counter with, "God is my unfailing supply, and large sums of money come to me quickly under grace in perfect ways." If you catch yourself dwelling on health worries, immediately declare, "I am a perfect idea in divine mind, whole, complete, and expressing radiant health." These aren't just positive thoughts, they're spoken declarations that carry the weight and power of sound, vibration, and intention. Florence also addressed the words we speak about and to others. She taught that gossip, criticism, and judgment spoken about others actually harm the speaker more than the subject. When you criticize someone, you're impressing upon your own subconscious the negative qualities you're talking about. And you'll find yourself experiencing more of those qualities in your life, either attracting people who treat you critically or finding those qualities emerging in your own behavior. Conversely, when you speak words of encouragement, appreciation, and recognition of others' good qualities, you're impressing your subconscious with positive patterns that will manifest as more good in your own life. Florence had a practice of finding something to praise in every person she encountered, understanding that this practice benefited her as much as it blessed them. She was particularly emphatic about words spoken in relationships. Many people destroy their relationships through careless, critical, or angry words. In the heat of an argument, words are said that cannot be unsaid, that hurt deeply and create scars. Florence would say that even if you didn't mean it or were just upset, those words went forth with creative power and did their destructive work in the relationship. This is why she counseled silence when emotions are high. Better to say nothing than to speak words you'll regret, words that will manifest as harm in the relationship. For those wanting to heal or improve a relationship, Florence taught to speak only words of love, appreciation, and recognition of the divine nature in the other person, even if you don't feel those things in the moment. By speaking them, you begin to create them. You impress a new pattern on your subconscious regarding that relationship, and the external relationship begins to shift to match the internal pattern you're creating. The flip side of this teaching is also important. Words spoken to you only have power over you if you accept them. Florence taught that you should reject any words spoken about you that doesn't align with your divine design. If someone calls you stupid, lazy, unlovable, or any other negative label, you have the authority to say, "I do not accept that word. It has no power over me. I am intelligent, energetic, and lovable, made in the divine image." You literally cancel the negative word by refusing to let it impress your subconscious. Florence told of a woman whose mother constantly spoke words of sickness over her. "You're so frail. You catch every illness that goes around. You've always been sickly." These words, spoken with the authority of a parent to a child, impressed deep pictures of ill health on the woman's subconscious, and indeed she was frequently sick. When Florence taught her to actively reject these spoken curses, even though the mother didn't intend them as curses, and replace them with affirmations of health, the woman's health began to improve dramatically. This raises an important point about words spoken over children. Parents, teachers, and authority figures often have no idea of the creative power of their words in shaping a child's self-concept and life trajectory. Words like "you're so clumsy," "you'll never amount to anything," "you're just like your no good father," "you're too sensitive," "you're not smart enough for college." These statements, especially when repeated, become programs in the child's subconscious that can limit them for decades unless consciously recognized and cleared. Conversely, words of encouragement, recognition of gifts and talents, affirmations of worth and potential, these create positive programs that serve the child throughout life. Florence would say that one of the greatest services we can provide for children is to be very careful and intentional about the words we speak to them and about them, understanding that we're literally programming their sense of self and their expectations of what's possible. Another crucial aspect of Florence's teaching on the power of words is the practice of blessing. To bless means to speak good over, to invoke divine favor and protection. Florence taught that you should bless everything in your life. Bless your home, bless your car, bless your food, bless your work, bless your finances, bless your body. This practice of blessing changes your relationship with these things from taking them for granted or seeing them as problems to recognizing them as gifts and infusing them with positive, appreciative energy. She particularly emphasized blessing your enemies or anyone who has harmed you. This is perhaps the most difficult application of her teaching on words, yet Florence insisted it was also the most transformative. When you can genuinely speak words of blessing over someone who has hurt you, you break the chain of cause and effect that would otherwise create more pain. You free yourself from the karmic loop of resentment and retaliation. You rise to a higher level of consciousness, where you're no longer a victim of others' actions, but a creator of your own experience through the power of your words. Florence also taught the practice of speaking words of completion or demonstration, even before you see physical evidence. This is similar to affirmation, but more specific. If you're working toward a particular goal, she would have you declare, "My perfect work-home relationship now manifests in divine order, and I give thanks for this completed demonstration." Notice the past tense completed. You're speaking from the perspective of the goal already achieved, which impresses the subconscious with the pattern of completion, rather than striving. One technique Florence used for particularly stubborn problems was what she called decreeing. A decree is a declaration spoken with absolute authority, as if you were a king or judge pronouncing a ruling that must be obeyed. For example, "I decree that all doors now open for my highest good. I decree divine timing in all my affairs. I decree that every obstacle is dissolved in the light of divine truth. There's a quality of finality and authority in a decree that goes beyond ordinary affirmation. Florence also recognized that silence can sometimes be more powerful than words. There are times when the highest wisdom is to say nothing, to hold your peace and let divine intelligence handle a situation. She taught that you should never speak when emotions are high or when you don't know what to say. In those moments, it's better to affirm silently, "Infinite intelligence speaks the right words through me," and wait until you have genuine clarity before speaking. The ultimate message in Florence's teaching on the power of words is this: you are shaping your life every moment with what you say. Your words are not neutral or powerless. They are charged with creative force that works through your subconscious mind to manifest corresponding conditions in your life. Most people speak carelessly, unconsciously, reactively, and then wonder why their lives are full of problems. When you become conscious of this power and begin using it deliberately, speaking only words that heal, bless, and prosper, you take control of your creative capacity in a way that can transform every aspect of your experience. Florence would remind us that this isn't about perfection. You don't have to police every single word with anxiety, but it is about awareness and intention. It's about recognizing that you have this power and choosing to use it wisely. It's about making a practice of speaking from your highest consciousness rather than your lowest emotions. And it's about understanding that complaining, criticizing, worrying aloud, and speaking negatively are not harmless venting, but actual creative acts that generate more of what you're complaining about. The good news is that you can start right now, in this moment, to change your word patterns. You can make a decision to speak differently, to choose your words with awareness of their power. You can create affirmations that resonate with you and use them to impress new patterns on your subconscious. You can practice blessing instead of cursing, praising instead of criticizing, declaring good instead of complaining about bad. And as you do this consistently, you'll begin to see your external circumstances shift to match the new patterns you're creating through your words. This is not magic, though it may seem magical. It is simply the operation of spiritual law, understood and applied deliberately. Your word truly is your wand. The law of non-resistance, winning through surrender. One of Florence Scovel Shinn's most counterintuitive yet profoundly transformative teachings is what she calls the law of non-resistance. This principle challenges everything most people have been taught about how to deal with problems and difficulties. We're trained from childhood to fight, to struggle, to overcome obstacles through force and determination. Florence says this approach is not only exhausting and ineffective, it's actually counterproductive, causing the very problems we're trying to solve to become more entrenched and difficult. The law of non-resistance can be stated simply: resistance makes problems stronger, while non-resistance dissolves them. When you resist something, when you fight against it, worry about it, complain about it, or give it focused negative attention, you actually feed it energy. You make it more real, more powerful, more present in your experience. But when you practice non-resistance, when you bless it, accept it, or simply refuse to give it your fearful attention, you drain it of power and allow it to dissolve naturally. Florence draws this teaching directly from Jesus, who said, "Resist not evil." She interprets this radical statement as meaning that in reality, there is no evil, therefore nothing to resist. Now, this doesn't mean that harmful things don't appear to happen, or that we should ignore genuine problems. What Florence is pointing to is a deeper truth. The things we perceive as evil or problematic are actually either misperceptions from our limited conscious mind or manifestations of our own fearful, resistant consciousness. When we fight them, we give them the very substance of our attention and emotion that allows them to persist and grow. Think about how this works in practical terms. You have a difficult person in your life, maybe a critical boss, a demanding relative, a troublesome neighbor. Your natural reaction is to resist them, to think about how wrong they are, to complain about them to others, to feel angry or anxious when you know you'll have to interact with them. Every moment you spend in this resistance, you're actually strengthening their hold on your peace of mind. You're impressing upon your subconscious mind images and feelings of conflict, criticism, and difficulty, which your subconscious then works to manifest as more of the same. Florence would teach you a completely different approach. Bless this person. Silently affirm, "I bless you and set you free. You have no power over my peace and happiness. I see the divine nature in you beneath the difficult behavior." This feels almost impossible at first. Everything in you wants to protest. But they really are difficult. They really are treating me badly. But Florence would gently point out that by thinking these thoughts and speaking these words, you're creating the very reality you're complaining about. You're using your creative power to perpetuate the problem. She tells the story of a woman who was consumed with resentment toward a family member who had wronged her. This resentment was like a poison in the woman's system, affecting her health, her other relationships, and her general well-being. Florence counseled her to stop all negative thoughts and words about this person, and instead practice blessing them. The woman was to affirm, "I fully and freely forgive you. I release all resentment. I see you surrounded by divine light and love." At first, these words felt like lies. The woman didn't feel forgiving at all, but Florence explained that the feeling would follow the practice, not precede it. By choosing to bless rather than curse, the woman was impressing a new pattern on her subconscious, and eventually the feelings would shift to match. And indeed, after several weeks of this practice, the woman reported that not only did her resentment dissolve, but the other person's behavior toward her changed dramatically. The external relationship shifted to match the internal shift in consciousness. This is a crucial point in understanding non-resistance. Florence isn't teaching passive acceptance of harmful behavior or suggesting you should allow people to mistreat you. Non-resistance doesn't mean being a doormat. What it means is refusing to engage in the energy of conflict. It means handling necessary practical actions, like setting boundaries or removing yourself from harmful situations, from a place of calm clarity rather than anxious resistance. It means not allowing the other person's behavior to disturb your inner peace. The woman in Florence's story might well have decided to limit contact with the family member who had wronged her, but she would make that decision from a place of self-care and wisdom, rather than from anger and resentment. The external action might look the same, but the internal state, and therefore the long-term effect on her life, would be completely different. Florence extends this principle to all of life's difficulties. Financial problems, health challenges, career obstacles, whatever the issue, resistance makes it worse, while non-resistance allows solutions to emerge. When you're facing a financial difficulty, your natural response might be to panic, to worry constantly, to look at your bank balance with anxiety and dread. All of this is resistance. You're fighting against the current situation, and in doing so, you're impressing upon your subconscious images and feelings of lack and fear, which perpetuate the financial difficulty. Non-resistance in this case would mean acknowledging the current situation without panic, affirming your faith in divine supply, and taking practical action from a place of trust rather than desperation. You might affirm, "This temporary appearance of lack has no power over me. The universe is my unfailing supply, and my good is now manifesting in perfect ways." Then you take whatever practical steps you can, not from frantic energy but from confident faith. Florence tells of a man who was facing what seemed like certain business failure. Everything in his situation suggested doom and disaster. Following Florence's guidance, instead of spending his days anxiously strategizing and worrying, he practiced a radical form of non-resistance. He would say, "If this business is meant to continue, it will. If it's meant to close and something better to open, that will happen. Either way, I am in divine order and all is well." This wasn't passivity. He continued to do what needed to be done, but he released his desperate grip on a specific outcome. According to Florence, within a surprisingly short time, an unexpected opportunity appeared that not only saved his business, but actually improved it significantly. The secret to understanding non-resistance is recognizing that fighting against something keeps you energetically tied to it. Your resistance is like a rope connecting you to the problem. The harder you pull on your end of the rope, the tighter the connection becomes. But when you drop your end of the rope, when you stop resisting, the connection dissolves. The problem may still be there temporarily, but it no longer has the same power over you because you're no longer feeding it your energy. Florence often quoted what she called an old saying, "If you're willing to do something you're afraid to do, you don't have to do it." This captures the paradox of non-resistance beautifully. When you face a feared situation with courage and willingness, without resistance, the situation often changes or dissolves. It's your resistance, your fear, your unwillingness that keeps the unwanted situation in place. When you drop that resistance, reality shifts. She illustrates this with the example of a woman who was terrified of losing her home. She worried constantly, imagined worst-case scenarios, and lived in a state of chronic anxiety about this possibility. Florence taught her to practice non-resistance. "If I'm meant to leave this home, I'm willing. There is a perfect divine plan for my housing, and I trust it completely. I release all fear and anxiety." The woman practiced this affirmation, while continuing to do what she practically could to maintain her home. And according to Florence, once she truly released her fearful resistance, the threat to her home dissolved entirely and an unexpected source of financial support appeared. Non-resistance also applies to health challenges. Florence taught that many illnesses are perpetuated or even created by resistant, fearful thoughts about health. Someone notices a symptom, immediately fears the worst, begins researching serious diseases, imagines progression of illness, and talks constantly about being sick or getting sick. All of this resistant, fearful attention creates a mental atmosphere that impresses pictures of disease on the subconscious mind, which then works to manifest those pictures in physical form. The non-resistant approach would be to refuse to accept the appearance of illness as ultimate reality. Florence would have someone affirm, "I deny this appearance of disease. It is unreal and therefore cannot register in my consciousness. I am a perfect idea in divine mind, whole, complete, and radiantly healthy." This isn't denying that symptoms exist. It's refusing to give them the power of your fearful attention and belief. It's seeing beyond the appearance to a higher reality. Florence was careful to clarify that non-resistance doesn't mean ignoring practical necessities. If you're sick, you might well seek medical help, but you do so from a place of trust and faith rather than panic. You take the medicine or undergo the treatment while holding in consciousness the perfect picture of health, not the fearful picture of disease. The treatment becomes a channel through which healing manifests, rather than a desperate attempt to fight off a powerful enemy. One of the most profound applications of non-resistance that Florence taught was in relation to change and uncertainty. Most people resist change because the unknown feels threatening. They cling to familiar situations, relationships, and circumstances even when those things no longer serve them, because at least they're known quantities. Florence would say this resistance to change is one of the greatest obstacles to growth and fulfillment. She taught people to practice what she called joyfully venturing into the unknown. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid of what might happen if things change," affirm, "I joyfully sail into uncharted seas. Divine intelligence guides me to my highest good, and I trust this guidance completely." Instead of clinging desperately to current circumstances, affirm, "I release with love anything that is no longer part of my divine plan, knowing that something better is on its way to me." Florence tells numerous stories of people who were stuck in unsatisfying jobs, relationships, or living situations because they were too afraid to venture into the unknown of something different. When they finally practiced non-resistance to change, when they released their fearful grip and trusted the process, they invariably found that the new situation that emerged was far better than what they had been clinging to. The fear of change had been worse than any actual change could be. This principle extends to our resistance to the natural rhythms and timing of life. We want things to happen on our schedule, according to our timetable. When they don't, we resist, we fret, we try to force and manipulate. Florence teaches that this resistance to divine timing creates delays and obstacles. When you practice non-resistance by trusting that everything happens in perfect timing, things actually flow more smoothly and quickly. She would have people affirm, "Divine timing governs all my affairs. Everything comes to me at exactly the right moment. I release all anxiety about timing and trust the perfect unfoldment of my good." This doesn't mean being passive or failing to take action. It means taking inspired action when it feels right and then relaxing into trust, rather than pushing and forcing from a place of anxious impatience. Florence also taught about non-resistance to other people's choices and paths. Many people exhaust themselves trying to control or change others, their spouse, their children, their friends, their co-workers. This is perhaps the most futile form of resistance because you have no control over another person's consciousness or choices. When you try to exert such control, you create conflict and suffering for yourself, and usually push the other person in exactly the opposite direction from what you want. Non-resistance in relationships means releasing others to their own path and focusing on your own consciousness. Florence would say, "I release everyone to their perfect divine plan. I have no power over any other person, nor do they have power over me. I am free, and I set all others free." This doesn't mean not caring about others or failing to offer help when appropriate. It means recognizing that each person must make their own choices and learn their own lessons, and your job is not to control them but to maintain your own peace and alignment with your highest good. A powerful technique Florence taught for practicing non-resistance is what she called blessing the situation. Whatever difficulty you face, instead of complaining about it, criticizing it, or fighting against it, simply bless it. Say, "I bless this situation," and release it to divine wisdom. Perfect resolution now manifests, and I give thanks for this outcome. This simple practice shifts your energy from resistance to acceptance, from fear to trust, from fighting to allowing. She tells of a woman facing a lawsuit that seemed certain to go against her. The woman was consumed with worry, anger at the person suing her, and fearful imaginings of loss. Florence taught her to stop all this resistant energy and instead bless the entire situation. "I bless this lawsuit. I bless the person bringing it. I know that only divine justice prevails, and perfect resolution comes forth for all involved." The woman found it almost impossible at first, but as she practiced, her anxiety dissolved. And according to Florence, the lawsuit was settled in a way that was actually beneficial to all parties, an outcome that would have been impossible if she had remained in resistant, fearful energy. Florence also recognized that sometimes non-resistance means being willing to lose, to let go, to surrender what you thought you needed. This is perhaps the hardest form of non-resistance, because our ego fights so strongly against loss. But she taught that often what seems like loss is actually the universe clearing space for something better. When you resist the loss, you prevent the new good from coming. When you practice non-resistance, if this is meant to go from my life, I release it with love and make room for my greater good. You free the universe to deliver something even better. One of the most famous lines from Florence's teaching is, "Courage contains genius and magic. Face a situation fearlessly, and there is no situation to face. It falls away of its own weight." This captures the essence of non-resistance. When you stop being afraid, when you stop resisting, when you face life with courage and trust, problems that seemed solid and real often simply dissolve. They were being held in place by your fearful attention, and when you withdraw that attention, they lose their substance. The practice of non-resistance isn't easy, especially at first. Everything in our conditioning tells us to fight, to control, to resist what we don't want. Florence acknowledged this. She said you might have to practice non-resistance as an act of will at first, even when you don't feel it. You affirm and bless even when your emotions are screaming resistance. But she promised that if you persist in this practice, your feelings will eventually shift to match your words and intentions. The subconscious, impressed with new patterns of trust and acceptance rather than fear and resistance, begins to manifest different circumstances that match these higher patterns. Florence would tell us that the universe is not our enemy. Life is not a battle to be fought. Problems are not evidence that we're being punished or that the world is against us. Instead, difficulties are often showing us where we're holding resistant, fearful consciousness that needs to be released. They're teachers, not tormentors. When we drop our resistance and approach them with the attitude of, "What am I meant to learn here? How am I being guided to grow?" the whole nature of the problem changes. The ultimate form of non-resistance in Florence's teaching is what she calls casting the burden. This is the practice of taking whatever difficulty you face and deliberately placing it in the hands of your superconscious mind, your higher consciousness, the divine intelligence within you. You say, "I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free to be joyous, harmonious, and successful." You literally hand the problem over to a higher wisdom and then release all your anxious trying to solve it yourself. This doesn't mean you don't take practical action, but you take action from inspiration and guidance rather than from fear and desperate struggle. You do what feels right to do, and then you rest in trust, knowing that divine intelligence is handling everything that's beyond your conscious understanding or ability. This is non-resistance at its finest, not passive resignation but active faith, not giving up but trusting completely in a power greater than your limited human will. Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching on non-resistance offers a radical alternative to the exhausting, largely ineffective strategy of fighting our way through life. She shows us that there's a gentler, more powerful way, the way of blessing, trusting, allowing, and accepting. When we drop our resistance and align with the flow of divine order, we discover that life begins to support us rather than challenge us. Problems that seemed insurmountable simply fade away. Doors that were closed swing open. What seemed like a battle becomes a dance, and we learn that surrender, far from being weakness, is actually the ultimate strength, the strength of absolute faith in the goodness of the universe and in our own divine nature. Karma and forgiveness, breaking free from cause and effect. Florence Scovel Shinn devotes significant attention to what she calls the law of karma and the law of forgiveness, presenting them as interrelated principles that govern how our past actions affect our present and how we can free ourselves from negative patterns. Her treatment of these topics is both practical and deeply spiritual, offering a path to liberation from the cycles of cause and effect that keep many people trapped in recurring difficulties. The law of karma, as Florence explains it, is essentially the law of cause and effect applied to human behavior and consciousness. She quotes the biblical principle, "Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." This means that whatever you send out in word, thought, or deed will return to you. If you send out criticism, criticism comes back. If you send out love, love returns. If you hoard and withhold, lack comes to you. If you give generously, abundance flows to you. The universe operates like a perfect boomerang. Your energy goes out and inevitably comes back to you. Florence is careful to explain that karma is not punishment from an angry deity. It's simply an impersonal spiritual law, like the law of gravity. Drop a ball and it falls. Not because gravity is angry at you, but because that's how gravity works. Send out negative energy and it returns to you, not because the universe is punishing you, but because that's how the law of karma works. Understanding this removes the sense of victimhood and replaces it with empowerment. If you created the problem through your past consciousness and actions, you can create the solution through changed consciousness and actions now. But Florence goes deeper than simple cause and effect. She observes that the real problem isn't the original action, but the energy and intention behind it. Two people might do the same thing. For example, both might decline to help someone in need. But if one declines from a place of selfish indifference while the other declines because they genuinely sense it wouldn't serve the person's highest good, the karmic result will be different. It's the consciousness behind the action that creates the karmic pattern, not just the action itself. This is where forgiveness becomes crucial. Florence teaches that while karma is a powerful law, forgiveness or grace is an even higher law that can supersede karma. You're not permanently locked into the consequences of past actions. Through genuine forgiveness, both receiving it and extending it, you can break free from negative karmic patterns and start fresh. Forgiveness works in several ways in Florence's teaching. First, when you genuinely forgive others who have harmed you, you break the karmic chain that would otherwise bind you to them through resentment and create more negative experiences. Many people hold on to grudges for years, replaying the hurt, nurturing their anger, telling the story of how they were wronged. Every time they do this, they reinforce the karmic connection to the person and situation, ensuring that the pain continues and similar situations recur. Florence tells of a woman who had been deeply hurt by a business partner who had cheated her out of a significant sum of money. Years had passed, but the woman still spoke about it frequently, still felt the anger and betrayal as if it had happened yesterday, still wished for revenge. Florence pointed out that the business partner had moved on with his life and probably rarely thought about the incident, while the woman was still imprisoned by it, still allowing him to steal her peace and joy even though he was no longer in her life. Florence worked with the woman to practice forgiveness, not the kind of forgiveness that says what you did was okay, or that requires reconciliation with the person. Real forgiveness, Florence taught, is primarily for your own benefit. It's a decision to release the other person from your judgment, to stop carrying the burden of resentment, to free yourself from the karmic chain. The woman practiced affirming, "I fully and freely forgive this person. I release all resentment and desire for revenge. This situation is now resolved in divine order, and I am free." At first, the words felt empty. The woman didn't feel forgiving at all. But Florence encouraged her to persist, explaining that the feeling would follow the practice. Over time, as the woman consistently chose forgiveness over resentment, something shifted. The anger lost its grip, the story lost its charge. And interestingly, according to Florence, a situation arose that completely vindicated the woman and compensated her for the loss, though not in any way she could have planned or forced. This illustrates another aspect of Florence's teaching on karma and forgiveness. When you release your desire for revenge and trust divine justice, things often work out better than any revenge you could have planned. The universe has a way of balancing accounts that is more creative and complete than human retaliation could ever be. But this can only happen when you step out of the way through forgiveness. Florence also teaches about the need to forgive yourself. Many people carry tremendous guilt about past mistakes, constantly reliving their regrets, punishing themselves mentally and emotionally for things they did or failed to do. This self-condemnation is a form of karmic bondage that prevents you from moving forward. Every time you think, "I'm so stupid for having done that," or "I can't forgive myself for that mistake," you're impressing your subconscious with patterns of unworthiness and failure that will manifest as more situations that confirm these beliefs. Self-forgiveness, Florence teaches, is not about excusing wrong behavior or pretending mistakes didn't happen. It's about recognizing that you did the best you could with the consciousness you had at the time, learning from the experience, making amends where possible, and then releasing the burden of guilt. She would have people affirm, "I forgive myself completely. I release all guilt and regret. I learned from that experience, and now I move forward in wisdom and love." One powerful story Florence tells is of a man haunted by something he had done years earlier that had hurt someone he cared about. He had apologized and made amends, but he couldn't forgive himself. This unrelenting self-condemnation was affecting his health, his relationships, and his success in life. Florence helped him understand that by refusing to forgive himself, he was actually showing a kind of arrogance. He was saying that his judgment of himself was more important than divine grace, that his guilt was more powerful than God's forgiveness. When the man finally accepted that he could forgive himself, that he could release this burden and trust in divine mercy, it was like a weight lifted. His health improved, his relationships deepened, and new opportunities for success appeared that had been blocked by his consciousness of unworthiness. The karmic pattern created by his original action had been completed through his genuine remorse and amends, but the additional karmic pattern created by his years of self-punishment needed to be broken through self-forgiveness. Florence also addresses what she calls karmic relationships, situations where you seem to attract the same type of difficult person or problem repeatedly. Maybe you keep getting involved with people who betray you, or bosses who criticize you, or friends who take advantage of you. Florence would say this recurring pattern is showing you an unresolved karmic issue in your own consciousness that needs to be addressed. The pattern isn't about the other people. They're just actors playing a role in your script. The pattern is about your consciousness, your beliefs, your expectations, your sense of self. Maybe you deep down believe you're unlovable, so you attract people who withhold love. Maybe you believe you're incompetent, so you attract bosses who criticize. Maybe you believe people will use you, so you attract people who do. The way to break these karmic patterns is not to keep changing the external players, getting a new job, leaving another relationship, finding different friends. The way to break the pattern is to change your consciousness, to identify and release the underlying beliefs that are creating the pattern, and to forgive all the people who have played the difficult role in your life up to this point. They were reflecting back to you your own consciousness. When you change that consciousness, the external pattern must change too. Florence teaches a powerful technique she calls invoking the law of forgiveness. When you're facing a difficult situation that you recognize as having karmic origins, perhaps an ongoing conflict, a long-standing difficulty, a pattern that keeps repeating, you can speak this declaration: I invoke the law of forgiveness. This situation is now resolved under grace rather than under karmic law. All parties are forgiven and set free, including myself. Perfect divine order now manifests. This invocation acknowledges that while karma is a real law, grace is a higher law. You're asking for the situation to be resolved not through the mechanical working out of cause and effect, but through divine grace that can interrupt that cycle and bring about healing and resolution in ways that transcend ordinary karmic rebalancing. Florence tells of a woman involved in a bitter legal dispute that had dragged on for years, consuming her energy and resources. Both parties were so entrenched in their positions, so committed to proving they were right and the other was wrong, that there seemed no possibility of resolution. When the woman invoked the law of forgiveness and genuinely released her need to win or punish the other party, amazing things began to happen. New information came to light, a creative solution was proposed by a neutral third party, and the dispute was resolved in a way that actually benefited both sides. The karmic gridlock was broken by the higher law of grace, activated through forgiveness. Another crucial aspect of Florence's teaching on karma and forgiveness is the idea that holding resentment harms you far more than it harms the person you resent. Resentment, she says, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's you who suffers from the toxic emotion, not the person you're resenting. And on a karmic level, the resentment creates new negative karma for you, even if you were originally the innocent party. Florence describes resentment as robbing man of power. When you're locked in resentment, you can't move forward. You're anchored to the past, to the person and situation that hurt you. Your creative energy is being drained into maintaining the resentment rather than being available for creating your new good. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give the other person, it's a gift you give yourself. It's the key that unlocks the prison of the past and sets you free to create a new future. She also teaches that forgiveness doesn't require the other person to deserve it, earn it, apologize for their behavior, or even know you've forgiven them. Forgiveness is an internal process. It's something you do within your own consciousness for your own benefit. You can forgive someone who has died, someone you'll never see again, someone who isn't even aware they hurt you, someone who would deny they did anything wrong. Your forgiveness doesn't depend on them at all. One practical technique Florence offers for practicing forgiveness is to see the divine nature in the person who hurt you, to remember that beneath their behavior, they are also a spiritual being, probably acting from their own pain and unconsciousness. You affirm, I see past the behavior to the divine nature within this person. I recognize that hurt people, and I release this person to their own highest good. I am free, and they are free. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it shifts your perspective from seeing the person as an enemy to seeing them as a fellow human being struggling with their own challenges. This shift in perspective makes forgiveness possible and breaks the energy of victimhood that keeps you trapped in the karmic pattern. Florence also addresses collective karma, the idea that groups, families, even nations can have shared karmic patterns that affect everyone in the group. Family patterns of poverty, illness, addiction, or relationship dysfunction can be passed down through generations, not through genetics alone, but through shared consciousness and beliefs. Someone brave enough to recognize these patterns, to practice forgiveness for all the harm done within the family system, and to consciously choose different beliefs and behaviors, can break the pattern not only for themselves, but potentially for the entire family line. The ultimate message in Florence's teaching on karma and forgiveness is one of hope and liberation. You are not doomed by your past actions or the actions of others. You are not locked into endless cycles of pain and difficulty. Through understanding how karma works, and through practicing genuine forgiveness of others, of yourself, of life itself, you can break free from negative patterns and create a fresh start. The law of grace, accessed through forgiveness, is more powerful than the law of karma. Love trumps judgment, blessing overcomes curse, and you have the power, right now, to invoke this higher law and set yourself free. The complete square of life: health, wealth, love, and purpose. Throughout Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching runs a consistent vision of what she calls the square of life, or the completed demonstration. This is her understanding of what a fully realized human life looks like when aligned with divine principle. The square has 4 corners, 4 essential elements that together create wholeness and fulfillment: perfect health, perfect wealth, perfect love, and perfect self-expression. When all 4 corners are in place, the square is complete, and you're living the life that was designed for you from the beginning. Let's explore each corner of this square and how Florence teaches us to manifest them. Perfect health. The first corner is your divine birthright, according to Florence. The body is meant to be a perfect instrument, expressing vitality, energy, and well-being. Disease and deterioration are not inevitable results of aging or living, but rather manifestations of wrong thinking held in consciousness. This is perhaps one of Florence's most challenging teachings for modern people to accept, but she's adamant about it. She teaches that the body is constantly renewing itself, that every cell is being replaced regularly, and that these new cells take their pattern from your consciousness. If your consciousness is full of thoughts of disease, aging, and decline, the new cells will manifest that pattern. But if your consciousness is full of thoughts of perfect health, vitality, and divine life force, the cells will manifest that pattern instead. Florence would have people affirm, "Every cell in my body is filled with divine light and life. I am a perfect idea in divine mind, expressing radiant health in every organ and system." She taught that you should never speak words of sickness about yourself. Don't say "I'm getting sick," or "I catch everything that goes around," or "I've always been frail." These statements program your subconscious to create the very conditions you're describing. She also taught that many physical ailments have emotional and mental roots. Resentment, she said, often manifests as arthritis or joint problems, the stiffness and inflexibility in your thinking becoming stiffness and inflexibility in your body. Worry and anxiety can manifest as digestive problems. Feeling life is a burden can manifest as back problems. This doesn't mean that all illness is simply mental, but it does suggest that our consciousness plays a much larger role in our physical health than most people realize. Perfect wealth. The second corner. We've already explored extensively, but it's worth reiterating that Florence sees prosperity as an essential element of the complete life. Not wealth for its own sake, not obsessive accumulation, but comfortable abundance that allows you to fulfill your purpose without constant worry about money. She teaches that it's easier to be spiritual when your basic needs are comfortably met than when you're consumed with anxiety about survival. Perfect love, the third corner, includes all forms of love: romantic love, family love, friendship, and the underlying love of self and of God that makes all other love possible. Florence teaches that love is not something you find, but something you express. You don't attract love by being desperate for it or by seeking validation from others. You attract love by being loving to yourself first and then radiating that love outward. She addresses romantic relationships specifically, teaching that many people create unsatisfying relationships because they're trying to fill an inner void through another person. They believe, "I need someone to love me so I can feel complete." But Florence would say that's backwards. You must feel complete first, must love yourself first, and then you can share that completeness with another person in a healthy partnership. She taught that the perfect partner for you already exists, either in physical form somewhere in the world, or in the mind of God waiting to manifest. Your job is not to desperately search or settle for someone inadequate, but to prepare yourself to recognize and receive this person when they appear. You do this by becoming the person you wish to attract. If you want a partner who is loving, be loving. If you want someone generous, be generous. If you want someone emotionally mature, do your own emotional work. Florence would have people affirm, "I give thanks for my perfect partner now manifesting in my life under grace in perfect ways." We recognize each other instantly, and our union is blessed and harmonious. Notice the present tense and the trust that this person is already on their way. She also taught about the importance of releasing past relationships with forgiveness and blessing. Many people unconsciously remain tied to past partners through resentment or unresolved feelings, and these ties block new love from entering. You must consciously release, I forgive and release all past relationships. I am free, and they are free. I now make room in my heart and life for perfect love. The fourth corner, perfect self-expression, might be the most important of all in Florence's teaching. This is about discovering and fulfilling your unique purpose, expressing your particular gifts and talents in ways that serve the world and bring you joy. She believed passionately that every person has something special they're meant to do, a place they're meant to fill that no one else can fill. Many people never discover their true purpose because they're so busy surviving, meeting others' expectations, or pursuing goals that society says are important but that don't resonate with their soul. Florence would say that your perfect self-expression already exists as an idea in your superconscious mind. It flashes into your awareness as something you long to do, something that excites you, something that feels like this is what I'm meant for. But then the conscious mind steps in with all its doubts and fears. That's not practical. You can't make a living doing that. Who do you think you are to aspire to that? And the vision fades, replaced by a more realistic but ultimately unsatisfying path. Florence teaches that you must trust these flashes of inspiration about your purpose. You must be willing to venture into the unknown, to try things that your logical mind says are impractical, to follow your joy and passion even when others don't understand. She promises that when you're truly following your divine design, the universe will support you. Resources will appear, opportunities will open, the right people will come into your life. She tells of many people who made radical career changes later in life, following their true calling despite practical obstacles, and found that their passion and authenticity attracted success in ways that years of struggling in the wrong field never had. The universe rewards authenticity and penalizes trying to be something you're not. To discover your perfect self-expression, Florence would have you ask, what do I love to do? What comes easily to me that others find difficult? What do people compliment me on or come to me for help with? What would I do even if I wasn't paid for it? The answers to these questions point toward your divine design. She also taught that your perfect self-expression might not be your formal career. It might be a hobby, a volunteer activity, a way of being in your relationships. The key is that you're expressing your unique gifts in ways that feel authentic and bring you alive. When you're in your perfect self-expression, work doesn't feel like work. It feels like play, like coming home to yourself. The complete square of life requires all four corners. You can't have true fulfillment with only one or two. A person might be wealthy, but sick and lonely. That's not the complete square. Someone might have love and purpose but constantly struggle with money. That's not complete either. Florence's vision is of the integrated, whole life where you have vitality and health, abundance of resources, loving relationships, and meaningful expression of your gifts. And she insists that this complete square is not only possible, but is actually your birthright, your divine design. The universe intends for you to have all of this. The only obstacles are in your own consciousness, your limiting beliefs, your fears, your sense of unworthiness, your resistance to your own good. The way to manifest the complete square is to work on all four corners simultaneously. Don't say first I'll get financially secure, then I'll worry about my health, then I'll look for love. That sequential thinking keeps you always in preparation, never in fulfillment. Instead, affirm and work toward all four areas at once. I now manifest perfect health, abundant prosperity, loving relationships, and perfect self-expression. The complete square of my life is now formed, and I give thanks for this divine design made manifest. Florence also taught that when you're truly aligned with your divine design, things manifest with what seems like miraculous ease. Doors open, opportunities appear, the right people show up at the right time, resources flow to you. This is not because you're lucky or special, but because you're no longer working against yourself. You're not sabotaging your good with limiting beliefs or pushing away your blessings with fear and unworthiness. She tells of a woman who had struggled for years in all areas of life, health problems, financial difficulties, loneliness, and work that felt meaningless. When she began to understand and apply Florence's principles, starting with the fundamental shift of recognizing her divine worthiness and birthright to the complete square, everything began to change. Not overnight, but steadily and undeniably. Health improved, money began flowing more freely, a wonderful relationship developed, and opportunities opened for work that truly fulfilled her. The woman said it felt like she had been pushing against a locked door for years, and suddenly someone opened it from the other side, and she fell through into a completely different life. This is what Florence promises is possible for anyone willing to do the inner work of changing consciousness. The complete square of life is not reserved for special people or those born with advantages. It's the natural state of being for all of us. When we're aligned with divine principle, Our work is not to make it happen through struggle and force, but to allow it to happen by removing the barriers in our own consciousness and then following the guidance that comes from our superconscious mind. Legacy and timeless wisdom for today's world. Nearly 100 years after Florence Scovel Shinn first published The Game of Life and How to Play It, her influence continues to ripple through the spiritual and personal development world. Her fingerprints can be seen on countless modern teachings, though her name isn't always acknowledged. Understanding her legacy and the continuing relevance of her work helps us appreciate not just where these ideas came from, but why they continue to resonate so powerfully. Louise Hay, founder of Hay House Publishing and herself a hugely influential teacher of affirmations and self-love, openly acknowledged Florence Scovel Shinn as a primary influence on her work. Louise discovered Florence's books during a difficult period in her own life and found in them practical wisdom that helped her transform her circumstances. She went on to build an empire teaching principles that Florence had articulated decades earlier: the power of positive affirmations, the connection between thoughts and physical health, the importance of forgiveness and self-love. Wayne Dyer, another giant in the personal development field, also drew from Florence's well of wisdom. His emphasis on aligning with divine intelligence rather than ego-driven striving echoes Florence's teaching about the superconscious mind and divine design. Marianne Williamson's work on A Course in Miracles and spiritual principles in daily life carries forward Florence's integration of practical and mystical wisdom. The entire modern manifestation movement, popularized by books like The Secret and teachers like Rhonda Byrne, is built on foundations that Florence helped establish. The idea that thoughts create reality, that visualization and affirmation can manifest desires, that the universe responds to our consciousness. All of this was articulated by Florence with unusual clarity and practical application long before it became mainstream. But Florence's work offers something that much of the modern manifestation teaching lacks: depth, nuance, and spiritual grounding. While some contemporary teachers present manifestation as a simple formula: visualize, affirm, and receive, Florence understood it as a more complex interaction between different levels of mind and consciousness, always operating within the larger context of divine order and individual divine design. She never taught that you could manifest anything you wanted through the sheer force of will. She taught that you needed to align with your divine design, to trust divine timing, to work with spiritual law rather than trying to manipulate the universe to serve your ego. Her teaching has guardrails that prevent some of the excesses and disappointments that can come from oversimplified manifestation methods. In today's world, Florence's teaching remains remarkably relevant, perhaps even more so than in her own time. We live in an era of unprecedented anxiety, despite unprecedented material prosperity. Mental health challenges are epidemic. People feel disconnected, purposeless, overwhelmed by rapid change and constant uncertainty. Traditional sources of meaning, religion, community, stable careers have eroded for many people. Florence's message speaks directly to these contemporary challenges. She offers a framework for understanding life that is both spiritual and practical, both empowering and grounded. Her teaching that you create your reality through your consciousness offers hope to people who feel like victims of circumstances. Her emphasis on the power of words gives people a concrete tool they can use immediately. Her vision of the complete square of life offers a holistic model of success that goes beyond just making money or looking good on social media. In an age of information overload where people are bombarded constantly with news, notifications, and other people's curated lives, Florence's teaching about guarding your consciousness takes on new urgency. She would say that what you allow into your mind through the media you consume, the conversations you participate in, the social media you scroll through, all of this is programming your subconscious and creating your future reality. The need for discernment and conscious curation of your mental input has never been greater. Florence's emphasis on non-resistance is particularly relevant in our polarized times. We live in a culture that encourages outrage, fighting, taking sides, being constantly activated and resistant to whatever threatens our worldview. The resulting stress and divisiveness are tearing apart families, communities, and the social fabric. Florence would teach that all this resistance is not only personally harmful, but actively creates more of what we're resisting. Her message of blessing, forgiveness, and non-resistant trust offers an alternative way of being that could bring peace both personally and collectively. Her teaching on the power of words takes on new dimensions in the age of social media, where words have never been more public or permanent. The casual negativity, criticism, and complaint that fill social media feeds are, from Florence's perspective, mass programming of collective consciousness toward fear, division, and dissatisfaction. Her challenge to use words only to heal, bless, and prosper is a radical countercultural stance in the age of Twitter rants and Facebook arguments. Florence's understanding of prosperity consciousness is particularly needed in a time when many people are struggling financially despite working hard, when traditional paths to economic security seem blocked, when the gap between rich and poor keeps widening. Her teaching that prosperity comes from consciousness rather than circumstances, that the universe is the true source rather than any particular job or system, offers both hope and practical guidance for navigating economic uncertainty. Her vision of perfect self-expression speaks to a generation questioning traditional career paths and seeking work that feels meaningful rather than just profitable. The rise of the gig economy, remote work, and entrepreneurship has created more possibility for people to craft work around their passions and gifts, exactly what Florence encouraged. But many people still struggle with the fear and practical challenges of leaving secure but soul-deadening work to pursue their true calling. Florence's teaching offers both the spiritual framework and practical techniques to make this transition successfully. Perhaps most importantly, Florence's work offers an alternative to both religious fundamentalism on one side and purely secular materialism on the other. She provides a spiritual framework that is deeply connected to the divine, but not dogmatic or exclusive. You don't have to belong to a particular religion or believe a specific set of doctrines to apply her principles. At the same time, she offers more than the shallow positivity or consumer-focused manifestation of some contemporary teachings. Her work has depth, wisdom, and a recognition of the sacred that many people hunger for. There are, of course, limitations and criticisms of Florence's work that should be acknowledged. Her teaching can sometimes seem to blame victims for their circumstances, suggesting that if you're suffering, it's because of wrong thinking. This can be harsh for people facing genuine oppression, systemic injustice, or circumstances truly beyond their control. Florence, writing in her specific time and place, didn't fully address issues of social justice or collective responsibility. Her work also reflects the limitations of her era in some ways. The language can feel dated, the examples culturally specific to early 20th century America, the religious framing off-putting to some modern readers. And like all teaching, hers can be misunderstood or applied in ways that create harm rather than healing, using affirmations to deny genuine problems rather than address them, or developing spiritual arrogance about having higher consciousness. But these limitations don't negate the core wisdom in her work. Every teacher speaks from a particular time and place, and Florence was no exception. The task for contemporary readers is to extract the timeless principles while understanding and contextualizing the time-bound elements. What makes Florence's work endure is that she articulated spiritual laws that are genuinely timeless and universal. The principle that consciousness creates experience, that words have creative power, that resistance strengthens what it opposes, that forgiveness heals, that alignment with higher consciousness brings harmony. These truths don't depend on believing particular religious doctrines or accepting cultural norms of her era. They can be tested and verified in anyone's experience. As we face the challenges of our own time, climate change, political polarization, technological disruption, pandemic uncertainty, economic inequality, Florence's teaching offers tools for navigating difficulty with grace and faith rather than fear and resistance. Her vision of the complete square of life, health, wealth, love, and purpose remains a powerful model of human flourishing. Her insistence that this is possible for anyone willing to do the inner work of transforming consciousness remains a message of hope. For those who discover Florence Scovel Shinn today, the experience is often one of recognition. This is what I've always sensed must be true but couldn't articulate. Her teaching feels both fresh and ancient, both revolutionary and obvious. She had the gift of expressing complex spiritual truths in simple, practical language that anyone can understand and apply. The game of life that Florence describes is still the game we're all playing. The rules she articulated still govern how thought becomes reality, how consciousness creates experience, how we attract or repel our good through our mental and emotional patterns. The square of life she envisioned, the integrated wholeness of health, prosperity, love, and purpose, is still what we're all seeking, whether we name it that way or not. Florence Scovel Shinn died in 1940, but her teaching lives on, passed from reader to reader, applied and tested in countless lives, proven effective by those willing to try it. Her legacy is not just in the books she wrote or the students she taught, but in the spiritual laws she articulated so clearly and the practical methods she provided for applying them. As long as people are seeking to understand how to live better, how to create prosperity, how to find love, how to discover purpose, how to transform suffering into joy, Florence's teaching will remain relevant and valuable. In closing, let me offer you this invitation. Don't just read about Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching or intellectually understand her principles. Try them, experiment with affirmations, practice non-resistance, work on forgiving someone who hurt you, Bless a difficult situation. Pay attention to your words and consciously choose to speak only what heals, blesses, and prospers. Connect with your superconscious mind and ask for guidance toward your divine design. Take active steps of faith, even when circumstances look impossible. The game of life is not just something to understand, it's something to play, and Florence has given us the rulebook, the strategy guide, the playbook for winning. Not winning at the expense of others, but winning in the truest sense, living the life you were designed to live, expressing your gifts fully, experiencing the complete square of health, wealth, love, and purpose that is your birthright. The game is happening whether you understand the rules or not, but when you do understand them, when you learn to play skillfully and consciously, everything changes. Problems that seemed insurmountable become solvable. Dreams that seemed impossible become achievable. Life that felt like a struggle becomes a joyful adventure. This is Florence Scovel Shinn's gift to us. Not just information, but transformation. Not just theory, but tools. Not just ideas about a better life, but a practical path to actually creating it. The game of life awaits. The rules are clear. The outcome is in your hands, shaped by your consciousness, manifested through your words, determined by your choices. Play well, play consciously, and may your square be complete. If you found value in exploring Florence Scovel Shinn's timeless wisdom, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into transformative spiritual teachings. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they have the power to create a better life through the game of life principles Florence so brilliantly articulated. Your thoughts, your words, your consciousness, these are the game pieces. Use them wisely and watch your life transform.